Greetings from Seattle, Washington, in the heart of Cascadia. I'm Jason Rigdon, and you are listening to The Podcast of Mystery, the show that always leaves you with more questions than answers, the podcast where I talk with extraordinary guests about the paranormal, the strange, and the unknown. On this episode, I have Thomas Gorence of The Paranoid American, a comics publisher focused on conspiracy theory content. I highly recommend checking them out at paranoidamerican.com. They've got some really great stuff. If you like comics and you're interested in conspiracy theories, you've got to check out Paranoid American. You're going to love this stuff. I'm also going to take a virtual road trip to the wonderful Hodag Store in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, in a new segment I like to call Another Roadside Attraction. We will learn all about their wonderful store and the fearsome cryptid known as the Hodag. But first, I need to give a shout out to John Adams of the Super Awesome Geek Show. You can find more about John at superawesomegeekshow.com. Thank you, John, for being a patron of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the Podcast of Mystery, please visit patreon.com/podofmystery. I need your financial support to keep this weird little show going. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider giving me some cash.
My name's Thomas Gorence. I've been self-publishing comics under the company name of Paranoid American for a little over a decade. And it's basically just the culmination of every crazy thought and rant and story that I've ever wanted to tell people without seeming and totally off my rocker. So putting it in the form of animation and comics and sometimes like games and things, it helps kind of break the ice, but also let me vent, the various theories that I've gone on the tangents and rabbit holes over. So, anyways, I've been doing comic books. I've got, I think, up to 13 titles now. Maybe only 3 or 4 have got mass release so far. I'm still working on releasing the others. But there's your quick intro for you. I mean, I'm happy to go into the whole life story, but that's probably the most pertinent.
Yeah. And if people want to learn about the work you're doing, where should they go?
So paranoidamerican.com, you can go and read at least the first chapter or so of almost all the comics I've been working on over the last 10 years. You can read them all for free. And then I've also got some links to like printed editions, things like that. Paranoidamerican.com.
So how did this start? You said you've been doing this for 10 years.
So how did it start? The original concept was that I was a professional musician for a while, and I really wanted to release an album that was completely, centered on conspiracy theories and Illuminati and reptilians. But I wanted like each song to sort of be like a documentary, like a 4-minute long song-based documentary on various topics, Operation Northwood, stuff like that. And there's actually a lot of artists that have done that very successfully. And I wanted to sort of make like a animated concept of that. Gorillas had just come out. So one of my big inspirations at that time was making like a Gorillas style music video with, animated characters that would be like the fictional bandmates. And they would always just be going and investigating conspiracy theories. But really the medium would have been an album or a series of mixtapes or something like that. The long story short, doing animation and music videos and hiring all the talent and everything, especially for something that you might want to have to be 7 or 11 or plus minutes, is extremely expensive and time intensive and requires lots and lots of people to be on board and coordinating and stuff. So I sort of took a step back from trying to do that huge, ambitious kind of audio visual approach and started with comic books as sort of a springboard, because essentially you need to have storyboards drawn and written up before you start doing an animation anyways. And before you've got your storyboards written up, you got to have a story, written down. So it just sort of naturally progressed of like, all right, well, I need to take some baby steps if I ever want to get to that final goal. And the first step is, write a short story, then turn that short story into a short comic, and then turn that comic into maybe a series. And that's kind of how it naturally progressed. I started with a title called Time Samplers, and originally the band name was called Sound Scientist, and it was a number of other musicians I worked with in San Antonio, Texas, and a few other places. And that it just didn't pan out exactly as I mentioned, as I kind of went over. But then the Sound Scientist music group sort of turned into the Time Samplers comic book duo. And after I worked on that for a few years, I learned a lot about all the stuff that I was doing wrong, and things that I can definitely improve on. And that's when I started sort of picking apart the things that I was trying to do with time samplers and kind of putting those into their own comics so that they could be a lot more laser focused. So I wasn't always trying to do everything in every comic and kind of turn into kind of like a scattered sort of approach. So 10 years later, now I've got like 13 titles instead of just the one. And I actually haven't gone back into the music or animation avenues yet, just because I've fallen in love with the comic format so much. And it's so much easier to work on, at least in sort of like an asynchronous style where, you don't always have everyone's full attention at all the time in terms of putting it together between writers and editors and artists and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of like the condensed version of where the comic book idea started and where it's at now.
And are these comics kind of are they covering individual kind of topics, or are there more of the traditional kind of comics of there are a group of characters that kind of go on kind of episodic or serial
No,
adventures,
let
or
me
say?
actually run down a couple of the
Yeah,
titles, because
yeah.
it started out exactly as that. There was a cast of characters, and I went like the traditional sort of hero's journey route where there's a wise old man character, there's sort of like the villain, there's allies that come across. Like I sort of try to take that real traditional approach just to kind of learn the footing. So Time Samplers has that where you've got two brothers, Lex and Cal. They were essentially grown up as MK Ultra, like child programming victims, kind of raised in a lab to infiltrate the music industry, and their specialty is kind of working subliminal messages into music, working with other popular artists. So when you hear like people kind of tongue in cheek mention like Jay-Z in the Illuminati, these guys would have been the ones that recruited him, or maybe unwittingly. And for whatever reason, they kind of come across the idea that what they've been doing isn't, I guess, great, and they're trying to figure out how to turn that around and use sort of their insider status to fight back the powers that be. And it gets a little bit goofy. Like this is the one that it's a science fiction and comedy. Like there's literal sheeple that they fight that are sheep and human hybrids that were originally cloned in, or they're originally created in like the early 1900s to kind of be servants for the upper elite that lived at like Jekyll Island and other kind of high status places, and they sort of like got out of control. And so that's probably the fun one that kind of has everything in it. Like if you want, it's got time travel, it's got Illuminati, reptilians, sheeple, it's got dick jokes, it's got all kinds of it's got like Gnosticism baked into it. There's almost a one-for-one recreation of silent weapons for quiet wars, key kind of highlights from Behold a Pair of Horse, things like that. So if you're deep into conspiracy theories, almost every page is going to have some Easter egg that you'll kind of geek over. So that's kind of my baby. I've been working on that one the most. I think I've got a little over 200 pages made, and I am wrapping up this year the fifth issue, which they go on. They start out on the Titanic, and they meet Jacob Astor, which then leads them to Nikola Tesla, and they're kind of jumping around through time, and it all culminates in them bringing Nikola Tesla back in modern day, kind of as like an AI, which has to fight against a Aleister Crowley AI, which was brought back by like Elon Musk and a few others. So it's all over the place. I think that one's kind of like the highlight if you want to see what I'm all about. Time samplers, I want to start in, and then as I mentioned before, almost every other comic sort of came out of time samplers, where it was like I wanted them, I wanted my time samplers characters to just go on like a 4 issue mission and go into like a specific topic in depth. And instead of doing that, I kind of just created different titles for those. So one of them is called Secret Mystery School. This one is it's kind of like a college road trip Animal House sort of approach on learning about Gnosticism. So if you could sort of combine like a frat comedy with the secret teachings of all ages by Manly Palmer Hall, that's sort of the two things combined. Um, this is probably one of the more important works, I think. I mean, it's loaded to the brim with fart and dick jokes and drug jokes and stuff like that. But at the under it all, they're legitimately learning about all these ancient and occult techniques. They're meeting ancient philosophers. They meet Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, and we've tried to kind of instill the actual lessons, but in like modern phrasings. So, like for example, they meet Diogenes the skeptic, who was known to kind of walk around through downtown almost nude and like shitting in public, just to kind of like upset the status quo, where people are eating and outside and just engaging in commerce and normal society, and here's this homeless dude like out shitting in public just to kind of be like a troll. He was like the original internet troll. So he's obviously makes a huge entrance as kind of like a sidekick early on, and they go on. And the basic premise is that Phil, one of the college students, he accidentally makes this mixture of like psilocybin and DMT and just like a college student hodgepodge, and he accidentally becomes enlightened and gets his teacher's assistant accidentally invokes this like ancient philosopher, and the fact that they're not actually enlightened means that now this consciousness can't get out of her. So in order to free her, they actually have to become really enlightened, and it kind of goes from there. So that one I kind of is near and dear to my heart. I love that one a lot, and I've been working on that one lately. I'm going to just keep going down the list here. I've got another one called Paranoid American History. This one is an anthology. This one's more nonfiction esque. Like they're all based on true stories, but where no one was around to record what actually happened. So, for example, I've got one, and they're all short stories. I think between 6 and 10 pages. One of them is called Geronimo's Skull, and it's about Prescott Bush and his other Skull and Bones members digging up the bones of Geronimo, so they can bring it back to their tomb and kind of display it as one of their grave digging rewards. There's another one in there about Operation Midnight Climax, which traces the actual players and Donovan and Dreamers and a whole bunch of other of the historical sort of progression of how Bluebird turned into MK Ultra, turned into testing mescaline on troops, turned into the actual Operation Climax CIA program, where they were unwittingly dosing citizens and military people with LSD to see if they would give up secrets to prostitutes. And right now, that series, I think the anthology is pretty much done, and I'm about to release that. And I think it's around 70 pages or so. It's got 8 or 9 short stories in it. Not all of those are on the website. Some of them will only be in print. There's another one that another kind of like a goofier one. This one's called Never a Straight Answer, with the acronym of NASA, and it's about Stanley Kubrick being hired by the CIA to fake the moon landings, because the premise is that our government, first we declare that we're going to send someone to the moon, and the actual people that have to make that happen are freaking out because they don't think they can get it done. And then they hear a rumor that the Russians are just going to fake it to kind of upstage us. So the ongoing plot of the entire comic is that we need to fake the moon landings before the Russians can fake the moon landings. Um, and then originally it was very much focused on the various theories about moon landings, crystalline structures and the lack of stars in the sky, kind of like the more technical things. But as time went on, writing it and working with the artist, it actually turned into something I like even more, which is where the moon landing is sort of just happening in the background, almost like Office, the Office or Office Space, where like it takes place on this sound stage, and there just happen to be astronauts being filmed in the background. But it's really more about how hard Stanley Kubrick is to work with and how horrible the astronauts are as actors. And we kind of make an ongoing joke that Buzz Aldrin's an idiot, and he doesn't know how to play chess, or he doesn't know the difference between like chess and checkers and things like that. That one's going to be really fun. It's man, I think it's around 30 pages or so. It's just going to be a one shot, and that'll be out probably next year at this point. So keep going. I've got a little more. There's another one called Paranoid Pamphlets. This one I kind of started out as being the thing I wanted to make originally, but it just took me forever to get to it. And it's based on the concept of these things called chick tracks, which I think they're a little bit more regional, and they definitely don't exist as much as they did in like the 70s and 80s. But I think sometime around 70s or 80s, this guy Jack Chick started self-making these highly religious little pamphlets, and he would leave them around on public, phones and in bathrooms and gas stations and stuff. And the whole premise was that he was hoping you would pick up this little comic book and read it and get sucked in and realize that you were actually living in sin and you were going to turn yourself over to Jesus and get baptized and like the whole thing. So, and I didn't take any of the religious aspects of that, but it was basically like I love the format. I love this concept of some normie comes across this crazy looking pamphlet. They're like, what the hell is this? And they read it and they learn something new, whether they agree with it or not, because that's exactly how I got introduced to Chick Tracks. I found one when I was working on a military base and like a phone stall, and it was about some biker, and I got like 4 or 5 pages in before I realized it was like a religious pamphlet, but I still loved it, and I just started collecting them over the years. So anyways, I started my own series, Paranoid Pamphlets. It takes the same format, but instead of any kind of religious connotation, the first one is all about MK Ultra, and it basically breaks down all the hard statistics that you can look up yourself about how it started from Project Paperclip all the way up to sort of modern day and all the various kind of sub programs that spawned out of it. So that one's the one I've been hawking the most lately, and I think it's a really great introduction, especially if you're not big into comics and kind of like the cartoony nature. This one is more of like a like here, if you want to be convinced of some crazy ass conspiracy theory, here's a great one to start out with. And that one you can read for free in entirety at
I would
paranoidamerican.com.
say having it actually in your hands though is an amazing experience because
Oh right, I think I sent you a
yeah,
copy of that one.
yes, yeah, yeah, and it feels so authentic to the original. What were they called again? The Chick
The
Tracks.
Chick Tracks.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like
from Jack Chick.
yeah, it was remarkable. I really got a kick out of that. So I have to ask you though, doing all this work, what kind of drives your interest in kind of this class of topic?
Well, the big part of it is just that you're not supposed to, and you kind of get banned from social media for talking about it. And the original books and documentaries that I kind of was raised on. You can't even buy them anymore, or if you can find them, they're like hundreds of dollars just because they've been kind of eliminated from the market as a whole. So I mean, it kind of started as like a pet project of like, hey, I like comics and I like music and I like, conspiracies. Let's kind of mash it all together and get other people interested too. Because there was, other artists and writers that I knew and worked with that didn't care at all about conspiracy theories because they've never heard of them, or, as far as it went, it was like 9/11 memes or something. And same thing, I worked at Disney doing interactive design and game design, and worked with, all kinds of creatives. And I almost like, I think at Disney is when I realized like these are such creative people and they could make, like, if they try to do what I was doing, then there would be all kinds of cool content out there that would be, exposing and sort of pushing these really interesting stories of, fact truly is sort of stranger than fiction is kind of the mantra of all that. So the long, I guess my long way around to say that what keeps me motivated is just seeing that, like, some of these topics, whenever someone's like, that can't be true, there's no way that's true. And then I look it up and it's like, oh my God, that is true. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I know that there was a big floating dick in the background when we covered this, but if you actually look it up, that like Operation Northwoods is a real thing and it really happened and things like that.
How has kind of the conspiracy theory community kind of responded to your work? It seems like maybe you are having a little bit more fun with it.
You know what? It's a mixed bag, man. I've realized over the last, man, the first 5 years that I was doing this, and I want to say that was maybe 2003 to 2008 or so. So those first 5 years, conspiracy theories were a little bit more widely accepted, very more generic. I think Occupy Wall Street was kind of like the flavor of revolution of the day at that point. Um, so that during that time there was a lot more reception and there was a lot more crossovers, especially like there was no, I guess there was no politicization of it. It didn't infer that you were like on one team or the other because you believed in certain conspiracy theories. Over the last 5 years, though, that is like completely fucking changed to now it's certain conspiracy theories that you might believe in will automatically put you on team A or team B. And there's a lot that goes on with that. There's also a lot of I've got a lot of messages on social media and emails where like I'll cover HARP, which is the high altitude auroral research program that was in Alaska that may or may not be shut down and stuff. And I mean, I can only give it a certain amount of real estate in the comic because there's so many other topics I want to get into. So there's one specific anecdote here, but I had like 1 or 2 pages on HARP in one of the time samplers issues, and I got multiple messages online of people saying that I was like whitewashing or I didn't mention this other thing and accused me of being, a government agent that was just trying to sort of like so I kind of get the full gamut of like I'm not invested enough in some of the theories to for everyone, but I'm also too invested for people that don't believe in any of it. And I also started out where I didn't want to kind of like offend anyone too much and kind of push it too far. And then it's almost cliche at this point because everyone says it, but like you can't please everyone all the time ever. So sometimes you just have to embrace like, you know what, this particular title might not be for you, but here's another one that you might like because it doesn't, go into those same kind of topics. So that was kind of the approach that I started making on that. But as in terms like I think that if you like conspiracy theories, you'll like this, whether or not you like comics. But the opposite is not necessarily true. If you love comics, there's especially in America, for whatever reason, there is a huge, huge kind of following of spandex superhero comics, and a lot of the readers that go like heads deep in that genre don't venture too much out of it to the point where it's almost like, well, I only read Marvel or I only read DC. So when you're talking about those like comic readers, it's a little bit harder to get them to kind of branch into this stuff than it is to get conspiracy theorists to read a comic book. But I face sort of the same challenges on both sides for sure.
Well, for some of those people, I need to ask, are you an agent of the conspiracy? Are you being employed by the CIA?
Uh, no, but I mean, you can't really trust me if I do that. So I mean, I don't. It's like an impossible question to answer,
Yes, yes.
right?
So,
I would say though, I'll totally freely admit that I am not immune to like the subliminal messaging that I tend to criticize. I fully participate in pop culture. I play video games. I use an smartphone and social media and stuff. So it's like yeah, I can't kind of go live out in the woods and Ruby Ridge myself and also produce digital content and publish it and collaborate with other people and stuff. So yeah, I guess it also helps me reconfirm this like self-fulfilling prophecy of never wanting to be in a club that would have me as a member. I can't remember, who originally said that, but that's kind of like my mantra for sure. Of if everyone's too happy, then I'm probably not pushing it far enough very often. But I also realize that most of the things that I would love to publish and write about they would be so niche and so alienating that I probably wouldn't want to cover them yet. I've brushed against some subjects here and there, but yeah, I've gotten some feedback that I was like, okay, maybe I'll focus on some more accepted stuff.
do you think that Americans are kind of uniquely interested in conspiracy theories? And if so, why do you think that is?
Absolutely. I mean, so you could argue this for a lot of countries, but America specifically wouldn't exist without secret societies. General trade unions and just fraternal organizations, they were like the backbone of how our country formed. Now it's all boards and professional committees and meetup groups and stuff like that. But I mean, I think the formation of so many institutions in America were based on conspiratorial sort of methods, and from both ends, right? It's not just the normal population finding out about how institutions and government have kind of been doing conspiracies, but like actual like those corporations and government entities are also like, oh yeah, this shit works. We're gonna keep doing this. So I think it just kind of becomes instilled over time, and it also helps greatly that the whole foundation of the country was sort of based on the rejection of sort of this larger authority. I mean, you can debate whether or not it was just supplanted by another authority, but I think our roots 100% give America that kind of rebellious nature, to kind of question things and push back and, sort of investigate. I mean, I wouldn't say that we've advanced a whole lot since 1700s, till now, but yeah, I think Americans specifically maybe are a little bit more interested in that. Although on the flip side of that, which I found is interesting, is that Americans in general, at least when it comes to like the comic book pop culture crowd, are less interested in political history and political science than other countries. Like for example, any of like the political topics and stories tend to be really well received in like France and Germany and European countries, more so than in American markets at times. So it's interesting. It has another thing to do with the whole spandex comic book nature of readers in this country. But
How do you respond to folks that, conspiracy theories are a big topic in the media right now. And, there's this attitude that spreading or even talking about conspiracy theories is dangerous or, dangerous, I think. How do you respond to those people?
well, those people are literally people on TV that are just spouting shit 24/7, constantly. And I think more specifically, we're talking about news channels. And I mean, their job is to take 15 minutes of news and spread it out and repeat it over 4 hours, and just kind of like fill the space with garbage. So I don't. I mean, one is considered the source. Another one is another quote that I can't remember the source of. But if you want to see who rules a society, find out who you're not allowed to talk against. That's a huge mantra in my life as well. So I would say that whenever someone says, this is dangerous information, don't even look into it, that makes me want to look into it all the more. So I mean, that might be a personality trait. I don't know how to instill that in other people. I think other people might actually believe that, like, yeah, there is information that's dangerous, but I don't know. I'm almost like I'm daring. Like I would love to just read a sentence in a book somewhere that fucking mutates the way that my brain works to where I just become a completely different person from there forward. And not like a religious like epiphany, but just like, oh, I read the anarchist cookbook and on page 88 there was this trigger phrase, and now I just want to kill people. I don't know. And I realize that's an extreme. Usually, when they talk about dangerous information, it's more about like misinformation and people, taking medical advice from people that are, shouldn't be giving medical advice and vice versa. But I don't. If you don't trust anyone, it's a lot easier to not care.
Well, like you said, when they make some of these topics forbidden, they are giving them power. It's like, people talk about the incantations we do regarding swear words, right? Swear words only really matter because we make a big deal about how you're not supposed to say them, right? If we just stopped caring, they would lose all their power.
Yeah, and actually, another really similar concept is the whole premise of freedom of speech. If you think about it, what protections would you ever need, from speech that everyone agrees with or that no one is offended by? Like the protection of freedom of speech is literally only there to protect things that people don't want you to say. So it's, I don't know, it's like you have to have dangerous, bad misinformation out there in order to, contrast it against the real information. Because otherwise, what? There's just one specific ministry of truth as the source of all information, and anything that goes against that is wrong. But I mean, take a look at any textbook that you got in school, and 10 years later, you're gonna realize, like, oh well, I mean, that we might not call them lies, but it was definitely like, not correct information that has been revised since then. So I don't know. I mean, a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like it's all sort of related on that same kind of angle.
So has it been difficult for you to kind of advertise and promote your work because of the way the social media?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm not allowed to advertise on any social media. Every once in a while, I'll make like an alt account and I'll sneak in like an advertisement on Instagram or something. But just I don't even know what it is. I mean, I can't get a response. Once you get banned or limited, they just won't talk to you. They won't tell you what you did. I mean, I intentionally pretty much only share, comic art and stories, and like I don't do memes. I don't post like opinion things, anything. It's always just like, here's this artwork that I'm working on. Here's this panel. But I think that just the type of people that follow me and like this kind of content, they get banned and labeled as extremists. So I get kind of thrown in with that same crowd, and I'm kind of blacklisted on social media. So it's not easy to get the word out. But the biggest thing has really been podcasts and talking with other people that are similar minded, whatever the angle is, whether it's a podcast on conspiracies, whether it's on game design, on comic design. That's usually how I get it out, because otherwise it's almost like a message in a bottle, right? You try to promote something online, you just kind of throw it out into the void and hope that it gets eyeballs on it.
So, what are some of maybe in your opinion, the biggest misperceptions about kind of conspiracy theories and kind of the conspiracy theory culture?
It's definitely not unanimous, and I would say that there is more infighting amongst conspiracy theorists than almost any other community that I've been part of. I don't know if it doesn't get to like vicious levels where people are like super nasty to each other, but I guess the very nature of a conspiracy theory only exists when you don't have all the information, or when the source of information is questionable, or when there's multiple angles and motives and stuff. And just by that very nature, you're inviting speculation. So everyone's going to have their own theory and way that they're going to speculate on something. And it almost reminds me of like medieval sort of like religious um, wars, where these like three sects of Christianity would all be fighting over each other because they one of them translated this one Greek word to a slightly different Greek word that had just like the tiniest little implication, but now they're gonna like murder a whole bunch of people over it because so I mean, no one's killing each other, I don't think, over conspiracy theory, but that same level of like, oh, well, that's not how this happened, and actually this is the guy that was there and this was the motive. And there's so much of that I feel like anyone that ever jumps into a topic in conspiracy theories and expects they're going to find that answer that's going to satisfy them, or they're going to find that answer that they believe and they convince other people, it's just not going to happen. So that's one of the aspects that I think that a lot of people misconceive about conspiracy theories. Because you say conspiracy theorists, and a lot of people, if they're not well versed, which is it's not something you can necessarily like major in school here, but they're going to assume oh well, you think 9/11 was staged. Of course it was, but they're gonna assume that you think that Jay-Z and Beyonce are in the Illuminati. Then depending on how it's being spun, you might get thrown into a camp of, oh, well, you're racist or you're woke or you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. So I think a lot of the time, the outside perspective is that, you learn about that, you become a conspiracy theorist because of the politics that are instilled in you. When really I want to say for me, but I think from a lot of people, most of the time you get into conspiracy theories because there was something that you believed and then found out it was so contrary to what you believed, and it makes you start questioning everything. I mean, the most innocent version of this would be a kid overhearing his parents talking about how Santa isn't real when they think he's sleeping. You got like a 5-year-old sleeping in the chair or something, like, oh, and they're joking about it like that. That's a slightly different version than finding out about Operation Northwoods, or finding out about I mean, I guess they're on different levels, because like finding out about Easter Bunny and Santa and things that you tell kids over time, that sort of has this like social acceptance of, well, you kind of do it for the kids to kind of like give them something to be entertained in, and think back nicely on their younger years. But it's the exact same concept, really, but it's just now the government is your parents and you're the child, and it's like we just want to make sure that these mean things about the real world don't break into your normal worldview and cause you to not want to go to work and be a productive member of society and whatnot. So I would say in summary that the biggest misconception is that conspiracy theorists all believe in the same conspiracies, and they all think that they're the have the same motives and whatnot. Um, it's it's a very mixed crowd for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of our problems in America is that, our government has lied to us openly. I mean, we know, like, the Iraq War, we all know it was a lie now. Like, they want to rewrite history, but we've been lied to so many times, it's hard for us to know or trust when they say there's nothing to X or this theory or something like that. Like, even I recently saw someone where they were talking about, I think it was the current White House press secretary, where she was saying about how we don't interfere in Latin American countries' democratic elections. And you're like, well, that's not a conspiracy. That was a whole thing. We did so much work to overthrow, and we still do, to overthrow so many countries. Do you have any thoughts about that? Because some of these things, they're not conspiracy theories. They're not the same as saying Stanley Kubrick may have faked the moon landing. These are things that we have the paperwork. There's history books about this, but they're still treated as conspiracy theories. Like a lot of the activities of the CIA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I wish I could explain that one a little bit more. I legit, like, I'm not trying to be sort of like facetious or make a snarky comment here. I legit think that they just say the exact opposite of what's really happening, for two reasons. One is it just completely mind fucks the populace into just not questioning anymore. It's because like there has to be some kind of like cognitive dissonance when you hear something that you know is patently false, but it's being like no one's being called out on it. It's like the official channel. We might not be as familiar with it in like in America, I guess, but I've got a lot of friends that live in Ukraine and sort of the Russian Federation, and for a lot of them, it's almost like if you heard it on the news or if you heard it from an official source, you already know that that's not the correct story. Like you already know, like they're basically just saying, okay, here's the fake version that everyone wants you to believe, and they kind of wait to figure out for themselves what the actual story is. Here, I think people don't expect it as much just because I don't know. We've been trained to think that if it's almost like, well, if she was lying, then I would have heard about that on the news because they all would have been talking about how she was wrong or lying, but it's kind of not the case. So yeah, and I think the other part of it too is just to instill that, the more times you repeat a phrase, that it just becomes true after a while. I mean, I it's hard to disagree with that. If enough people believe that certain thing is true, it just kind of de facto becomes true, regardless of what really happened.
So when you are, reading the newspaper or hearing about new conspiracies, what do you use as kind of like maybe your filtering mechanism to see what you were going to look more into or what things you're going to just discount?
So I waffle on this a lot, and I actually I take a nice safe backseat of not necessarily trying to address conspiracy theories that are like brand new that just happened, because it takes fucking 10 plus years to start getting redacted reports, and people start feeling start getting like remorse and start releasing like exposed tell-alls, and interviews will be uncovered and court records, or none of that comes out in the first 2 months after conspiracy happens, or in the first, like a great example is the Vegas shooting, right? Like I would love to write a little bit on that and come up with some ideas for it, because I mean I've heard a number of theories that are very engaging, but there's pretty much complete absence of any other detail that's come out since then. And I mean, I have to believe that more will come out eventually, but then again, we're still waiting on the JFK records to kind of be revealed, and that's been postponed a number of times. So I don't know if it'll ever kind of come out. So there's always going to be nonstop speculation on that. So in terms of like when a new one comes out, let's talk about COVID or something. I tend to look at the people involved. Follow the money is always the number one rule, but then also look into the players, and it has like Fauci. Was he ever involved in the news before? Well, it turns out he has. Was he wrong about that? Well, it turns out he might have been wrong about that too. So I mean, I tend to look at that like it's almost like if you're playing fantasy football, right? You don't know how that team's going to perform, but you can look and see the stats of those players and how they've kind of reacted in similar situations in the past and what the outcomes were, and kind of go based on that. So, yeah, modern conspiracies, I play them like fantasy football. Who's the coach? Who's the quarterback? Who's running? Who's running the calls? And that'll kind of give you an idea of what might be in the playbook.
So there's some conspiracies, like the JFK assassination, where there's questions about it and people have kind of made theories about what exactly happened. But then there's kind of another class where it's kind of the meta conspiracies, the conspiracies about conspiracy theories. Do you have any feelings about those? Like those always, to me, seem like the most
Okay,
precarious.
give me an example.
Like some people will say, well, like I think some of the QAnon folks, they have incorporated almost every other conspiracy into their conspiracy. It seems.
Yeah, well, QAnon is, to me, QAnon is a 4chan creation. So I don't know. It's hard to separate that from like Pepe memes, where like I don't think the people that created Q content took it nearly as serious as the people that ingested the QAnon content, which is the exact same thing as the OK symbol and every other thing that's come out of 4chan over the last decade or so. So I don't know, like it's I respect it. I like it a lot in terms of it kind of exposes the seams a little bit on, how fucking vulnerable people are to just anything and everything. But I don't know. I'm a fan of QAnon as a social engineering experiment, but I absolutely hate the type of people that it kind of revealed and bred. It absolutely, it spawned a new generation of conspiracy theorists, which I don't. I'll play gatekeeper and say that it wasn't what I had in mind when I became a conspiracy theorist. It was not sort of QAnon related things. And another a great fucking part of this QAnon thing is that every good conspiracy and especially every good misinformation campaign has to revolve around actual nuggets of truth, because otherwise it would just be discounted immediately. So you take a nice good nugget of truth that might actually have all kinds of um, connotations to it. You throw Epstein's name and then you just put a Q next to it and then you just put any other Republican's picture next to it, and no one even has to read a headline or an article or anything. They just see Epstein, Q, other guy. Okay, I get this. I know how I can run with this. And I mean, I think that's sort of the definition of a meme. And so QAnon, I think, kind of just takes that to the next level. I mean, QAnon is a massive global fan fiction sort of experiment, which I I love for all the wrong reasons. Like I don't want I don't want to endorse it and like everyone should go become Q members, but I mean I find it fascinating, like beyond fascinating. It's like Heaven's Gate, right? Like I find Heaven's Gate beyond fascinating. I would never advocate joining Heaven's Gate or killing yourself to get onto a spaceship that when the Hale Bopp comet goes over, but man, it's fucking fascinating.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a delineation in the conspiracy theory kind of world of the folks that take it super, super seriously. And I think maybe the folks maybe more like you and me who have a little bit more fun with it. We're not making fun of anything, but we're having kind of fun with it. Some people, I think they're serious, especially the QAnon community. They take it so incredibly seriously that it's hard not for me to make fun of them.
And that's not new, because there's a strong correlation too, where there's another big divide, especially if you go back to 70s, 80s, 90s conspiracy theory. There was a very hard divide between like the strong fundamentalist Christian style conspiracy theorist and almost everyone else. Where I constantly refer to this as the water boy Bobby Boucher's mom, where hockey is the devil and Vicky Valancourt is the devil, and anything that I don't want you exposed to is the devil. I think there was like that never really appealed to me, but that was also the source of so much of the original kind of conspiracy literature from 80s and 90s and stuff. It was almost always, and the reason why this is all happening is because of the Jesuits, or it's all because of the Luciferians, and it was never like, and it's all because a family wanted to establish a dynasty for thousands of years to come and instill so much power and capital that it would be impossible to unseat them politically or socially. But that doesn't have the same nice ring to it as Lucifer wants to kill you, or the communists want to kill you and stuff. I mean, some of those might be true, but they're just so overly simplified to the point where it's the 20 or 30 years ago version of QAnon was to just instead of say he was releasing it from the inside, it was always like, and read the Bible and that'll give you the truth.
So I have to ask, I kind of mentioned earlier, it's one of my favorite kind of conspiracy theories. I don't have an answer. So I always like asking people what they think. Who do you think killed JFK?
Oh man, so I can't give you a direct answer on that because I think that if the dude was like trying to set a world Guinness record to make the most amount of powerful people around the entire world to want to kill you, like he would win every medal for it. So it would be so much easier, right? If he hadn't made so many enemies. He wanted to take out the IRS, FBI. He wanted to audit the Fed. He wanted to basically end the sort of Cold War after he got duped into supporting it. And I also don't think he was a golden child, right? I mean, his family money came from smuggling alcohol during Prohibition, and there was basically a very big sort of underworld mafia tie-in to the Kennedy family in general. I have no idea how far that went to himself his life, but he was also kind of like a television poster child too. So I mean, I don't. I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent of like JFK gets elevated as sort of like the second coming of Christ, but I mean he was a normal guy that had normal guy flaws and other things. He was I there's a theory that I don't know how much you can validate from, but it makes a lot of sense, and it's one that I fairly prescribe to, and is that he had some kind of STD issue, and he had like a syphilitic brain to a certain point where like they had to keep him sort of like engaged on all sorts of medications and things where he wasn't necessarily running the show. It might not have been to Biden levels, but it might have been somewhere along those lines. So I mean, he was gonna face sort of a not a great end at some point. But all that said, I'm pretty sure it was George Bush and the and some sort of inner cabal within the government. I don't think it was 100% the Cubans. I don't think it was the Russians. I don't think it was the aliens. Um, I think the dude with the crazy clown makeup and eyebrows definitely had something to do with it. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. The one that Joe Pesci played in the JFK movie.
Is there any of these conspiracy theories that you 100% believe are true?
I 100% believe that we faked the moon landings. Now, I don't think that means we weren't at the moon. I think we also went to the moon. We most likely definitely were there, even when we said we were there. But I think that a majority of the footage was 100% fabricated, which is it's a one of my favorite kind of lines to straddle because it's like, no, I didn't say we didn't go to the moon. I'm just saying that at the time we might not have had the technology to do a fucking live stream from the moon at a point where sometimes I can't even stream the YouTube video of that, in non-real time. So I'm being overly simplistic there, but I think that's a big one that NASA accidentally wrote over the tape because there was a budget cut, and they were like, oh well, we got to save $70 on this roll, so we'll just write over the most monumental achievement in humankind history. So, oops, that's one I fully believe in. A lot of the other ones that I like to focus on, I think, are ones that I don't have to prove or I don't have to convince anyone. Like MK Ultra existed; it was real. The reason for it was we wanted to control the human brain because we thought other people were going to control the human brain. We wanted to beat them to the punch and figure out how it works and how to extrapolate from that and learn defensive techniques. I guess sort of the cooler speculation is like, okay, well, what are we doing now, 40 years later, 50 years later, and those same things. So, um, what other? I mean, I 100% think 9/11 was an inside job. I'm not even Building 7, Tower 7 is a big one, but honestly, I think Shanksville, PA, is um, one of the biggest examples of something that the more you look into, the less it makes sense. This this might be part of the that Mandela effect, where you're misremembering facts. But I swear that right after that event happened, there was in the Shanksville there was this huge like scorched earth area where they, on the news, they were basically presenting it like this is where the plane kind of crashed, because you saw this, this big brown spot in the ground. But then it came out soon after that that even on the Google Maps imagery, that was actually a collapsed mine that had been there for years, and it just kind of was a nice convenient photo shoot for, oh well, obviously that big black thing is where a plane exploded. No, it was a collapsed mine. The plane exploded in midair. That was another big one. I went to the News Museum in DC when it was still open before they closed it down, and they had the passport from one of the bombers, like completely unscathed. It looked like it came like straight off the printing press still. So like those ones I feel are beyond sort of redemption. And similarly, I think Oklahoma City bombing, that was very similar. It was internally placed explosives. I think that shit. I mean, it makes me sound extremist, but pretty much any FBI ATF involved scandal, I think, was done intentionally or was escalated intentionally. So I consider all that conspiracy to the fullest.
What do you have any opinions about what their motivations would be, the people that were actually behind this?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's essentially it's just always, hey, look how fragile we are. You better give us some more power to protect you guys, because there's bad people out there. I mean, if you want to boil it down to the most simplistic version, there's other more nuanced elements of that, of like, hey, we're trying to take away guns, but people aren't necessarily buying it, so now we need to sort of, we kind of need to state our case a little bit stronger. So let's instigate some issues out there and kind of show people how bad it really is. They just don't know it. And I think you can. There's a lot of modern day examples of that too, and a lot of different like social movements and stuff. I mean, I'm looking at like the 9/11, Oklahoma City, Waco, Ruby Ridge. Those all sort of have this same thread where it was, find people that are stocking up on firearms and convince the world that they're crazy cults and they just want to kill everybody. And I think it worked. I think it worked fucking really well, and it's going to keep working the more they do it.
Well, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
ParanoidAmerican.com. That's where I jump on and off social media. I never know if my account's going to be there or banned or not. So just go to ParanoidAmerican.com and read the various comics, and yeah, if you like anything.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and your work. I mean, I love it.
Well, great. I hope you keep following along. I promise there's whatever you've seen, I've probably got at least twice as much content that I just haven't released yet,
Oh,
because
fantastic.
it's not easy.
Have you had a paranormal experience? Maybe you've seen a ghost, a UFO, Bigfoot, or maybe something even stranger. I want to hear your story. Would you please consider sharing your story on the podcast Mystery? I do interviews over Zoom and the good old-fashioned telephone, and the scheduling is super easy. Also, my guests can remain anonymous. If you would like to share your story on the podcast of Mystery, please email podofmystery@gmail.com.
My name is Ben Burnell. I am owner of the Hodag Store in Rhinelander, Wisconsin.
So, what is the Hodag?
The Hodag is an old folklore legend the lawyers came up with back in the 1800s, and a guy named Eugene Simeon Shepard. He's the guy who created it. He was a timber cruiser of sorts, kind of surveyed the land for all the lumberjacks, and it was his idea to come up with this creature as a gimmick to get tourists off the train. And he'd stand there at the train and offer to show them this creature. And he'd say, hey, give me 5, 10 cents and I'll go show you this beast. And he'd walk them, 3, 4 blocks away from the train depot to his house, lead him to the barn where he'd have the creature or the beast stored. And he'd go in there to check on it. And he'd have his son in there. And his son would be making all this noise and racket and stirring up ruckus. Meantime, Gene is changing into a shredded version of the clothes he was just wearing. He'd then hop out of the barn and say the Hodag is too fierce and too vicious to see today. Come on back tomorrow and see if you can see him then. And so on forth, people came from all over the place, as far as New York, Pennsylvania, and farther, on the train to see the Hodag.
But no one actually saw the Hodag.
No. Gene was very careful and sly about it, and he never really revealed the beast. He would go to the carnival, the Oneida County Fair, and to reveal the beast. And when he did so, he did it in a dimly lit tent, and he'd have kind of a wall partition in there, and he would tell his tale and story about it, and his son would be back behind the wall once again, making more noises and stirring up ruckus. And like I said, you wouldn't really get to see the beast, but the people left believing the Hodag was real.
Wow. And so they thought it was real. Did people start seeing it like in the woods?
Yeah, there were claims, Hodag sightings back in the day.
Would you consider the Hodag a cryptid, or would this be something kind of different? Because it seems like at least you're open saying that it was not 100% real.
Well, I guess define real. Is Santa Claus real? So the creature itself may not be real, but its legend and legacy and its spirit is definitely real in the Rhinelander community.
Yeah, so that's why I was kind of wondering. It seems like the whole community has kind of picked this up as almost like a mascot.
Well, Gene discovered, however you want to look at it, this creature in 1893, and I believe it was about in the 20s, the high school adopted the mascot. And while we're talking about the high school adopting the mascot, the original creature that Gene created was a black Hodag. And nowadays, many formations that you see is a green Hodag. The way the Hodag became green was when the Hodag was adopted by the high school's colors were green and white. So either the school's colors needed to change or the color of the Hodag. I think you can tell which one it was. But yes, he is everywhere in town. He is on the cop cars. He's on the fire trucks. He's on the plow trucks that plow the snow in the wintertime. We have murals all over the town. 100-year-old sun painting of a Hodag on the third floor near the dome inside the Oneida County Courthouse. Church downtown has a stained glass Hodag with a saber stabbed through the Hodag. It's pretty wicked stained glass, actually, for a church. He's on the water towers. I mean, you name it, he's everywhere.
And you have a shop that is basically tons of Hodag stuff, right?
Yes. We got about, last time I counted, about 260 different Hodag items in my store.
What do you think accounts for kind of the enduring legacy of this mythical creature?
The legacy of the Hodag, I would say its uniqueness, for one. One, it's our school mascot. It's our every town mascot. I mean, I know there's a few other towns in America, Point Pleasant with the Mothman and whatnot, that kind of glorify our cryptid monsters. But the Hodag, I mean, he's really full blown out all over the place here. There's probably 300 statues all over the town. 300 depictions, paintings, murals, statues. And one way too, a lot of people look at it, when you say a Hodag, local people, we are Hodag because, the school's mascot was a Hodag. So I think that has to do a lot with it too, with, school reunions and everything like that. We're all Hodags. We all come together. We're all united as one. And it's pretty cool and unique, I think.
Have any neighboring towns or even towns from clear across the country tried to try to maybe steal the Hodag and claim that they have one?
Yes, over time there has been a few encounters. I want to, and it's usually a neighboring state of Michigan that seems to love our creature of the Hodag here. I know there was a town in Upper Michigan, I believe, Bruce Crossing in like the 70s or 80s. Had kind of a little stunt with them kind of stealing the Hodag of some form. I don't know the details on it exactly. Recent history and time, a couple of years ago, a township in Lower Michigan tried claiming ties to the Hodag and wanting to use the Hodag for a festival of sorts for some reason. I'm assuming, kind of steal the creature.
Do people ever have or claim to have sightings of this creature in the woods? Or does everybody pretty much know that it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing?
Nowadays, everybody pretty much knows what's going on with it. Back in the day, though, 60s, 70s, 80s, it wasn't an unusual sighting to see in a newspaper, a Hodag sighting being reported. There's been a few people who have actually called the police, and the police reports claiming to have seen a creature in the woods.
Isn't there like a Hodag festival? Did I get that right?
Well, there's a couple things. There's a lot of people when they think, or hear Hodag, a lot of people assume the Hodag Country Music Festival. That's been going on, oh boy golly, I think 40 years roughly, something like that. Draws 20, 30,000 people. That's actually happening. Music starts in 3 days now, I think. A 4-day music festival. But now also, myself in cooperation with the Rhinelander Area Chamber of Commerce and the Pioneer Park Historical Complex, we are working on creating a new event, Hodag Heritage Days, a festival based on the beast, not country music. Kind of, similar to other kind of gatherings like Champ Day or Mothman or the Van Meter Visitor Festival for the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Day, trying to start up a Hodag one. We kind of had like a little inaugural test kind of ceremony day. What was it? Week before Memorial Day, I think it was. And a good little turnout from the community, and just kind of had a little park parade, and we had some Hodag activities going on throughout the week, kind of like Spirit Week. Still trying to keep it kind of COVID friendly with everything going on. Not trying to rush into a big major event right away, but kind of an event that slowly grows every year into something big, we're hoping.
So what kind of customers do you get in your gift shop? Are they mostly locals?
No. They are mainly tourists, and they come from all over the place. I have a pin map where you can grab a pin and stick it in the map where you're from. And they come from all over the country. They actually have 2 different types of pins on that map. There's a white pin if you're a tourist, and a green pin if you're a Hodag. Basically somebody born, lived, raised, went to school here in Rhinelander. So you can kind of, if everybody followed the rules when they grab the pin, you can kind of see where all the Hodags have spread out across the country, I guess. Majority of the map, or majority of the pins, though, come from the Midwest. Southern half of Wisconsin, northern half of Illinois, Indiana, Minneapolis. The map is pretty heavily covered right there. Surprisingly, Denver, Colorado is extremely packed with pins. A lot of people from Denver coming up to the Northwoods are loving the Hodag, I guess.
And so, do the people that coming to your store, do they think that the Hodag is real? I'm very fascinated with this because, like, so many places, like, still claim that the creature is 100% real. But you seem like you're fairly honest with, that it's more for fun.
I go both ways with it. Depending, I kind of read the person when they walk in, and I kind of look at them, and depending on how they ask, is the Hodag real? I might go and say it's just kind of a hoax or folklore, or sometimes, I won't lie, if they're kind of a gullible person, I'll kind of go along. Oh yeah, it's a real creature out there, and I do get some people believing it is a Hodag out there in the woods running around. Gotta have a little fun with it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, have there been any issues with people, I'm in Seattle and we will have people do their they call it like squatching, and they'll go out into the woods trying to hunt for Sasquatch, and there's a little bit of a danger there just of people getting hurt out in the woods. Have you ran into any of that with the Hodag, of people not really knowing the greater context of what's going on, and you're like, maybe you need a little help before you go out into the woods?
I do know of a few people that have claimed they have walked along the shores looking for the Hodag, and they do, in fact, believe it is out there.
Oh, okay, so
There are people out. There are people out there.
but not the locals. The locals seem like they kind of know what's up.
No, not the locals. So the locals, we're immune to it. The Hodag, kind of.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I said, I'm a born and raised Hodag. So since the first day I can have memories of seeing Hodags, I've been seeing them for 30 years now. So I drive around and these things, they're just, they blend in. So, but yeah, I mean, they're on light poles. You're just driving around. They're everywhere. So,
But there have been people that have tried to tell you they have actually seen it, and how would you react to that?
yeah, no, I have had people say they've seen them, and it's I just go along with it, and I'm all about it. So if they say they've seen one, I believe them.
Well, that's pretty wonderful. That's a great attitude to have. And I'm far away in Washington State, but going through your Instagram and seeing your store, you have an absolutely wonderful store.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Have you so you say you follow me on Instagram, obviously, so I post most of my content on there. Have you seen some of my recent music videos that I've made with my friend Carrie from the Login Museum?
Yes, those are wonderful.
We had the I Saw a Hodag Carrie Exotic parody of I Saw a Hodag, or I Saw a Tiger for Joe Exotic, the Tiger King.
It was fantastic. Yes.
Yes, yeah, that was a beautiful song. That is a cult classic here in Rhinelander. Well, at least that's my goal. It's working into it. So
Yes.
I have the Country Fest, the Hodag Country Music Festival here in town. I got them to play the video on the Jumbotron during the festival, like after like an act ends or something. So pretty excited about that. We're trying. We pushed really hard to get Carrie Exotic to do a live performance up on the stage. They said not this year, maybe next year. So we're pushing for it though.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah, I think I saw one where you were. Well, it wasn't music. It was where someone was trying to find the Hodag for almost as if it was the groundhog.
The Grounds Day.
No, Grounds Day. Okay.
Yeah, Grounds Day. That's our new tradition there. I love Grounds Day. That's we got a good idea coming up for next year coming here. So we're gonna kind of do a Grounds Day or Groundhog, the movie kind of spoof is what our plan is. It should be pretty hilarious.
It sounds wonderful.
We think, yeah, I'll give you a little teaser of one of the ideas for it. Bill Murray, he dies every day. He wakes back up and whatnot. Carrie, he's gonna be the guy waking up and everything. And well, one of the times I think we're gonna run him over with the Hodag van. I think as one of the times for him to wake up again. So it should be pretty hilarious.
So if people want to learn more about the Hodag or your gift shop, where should they go?
Well, if they want to learn about my store, they can go to thehodagstore.com or check us out on Instagram or Facebook at the Hodag Store or on YouTube at Hodag Store TV. And if you want to learn some more about the Hodag, you can go to explore Rhinelander.com and learn about the Hodag and where you can find them all around town.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And this is really a wonderful thing. I really hope to visit someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Where did you say you were from?
Seattle.
Seattle. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, that's quite a bit of ways. I might make it out on the West Coast. I do a lot of skiing in the wintertime, so we might be making a trip out that way, I think, this year. So.
Well, thank you once again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, and another little thing, too, I guess. The neighboring community of Monaco, Wisconsin, has a kind of little cryptid folklore, little creature of its own. Not well known, but it's called the Rhinelander, which is part rhino, part elephant, and part octopus.
Wow.
Yes. The locals call it the Venus Lake Monster, as it sits on the shores of Venus Lake in Monaco, Wisconsin, about 13, 15 miles from my store. And it's a old stump monster the lumberjacks pulled out of the wood, and they thought it was cool, so they saved it. And they brought it up to the highway, kind of the main junction of Monaco there, and I think it sat at a bar that used to be there, and it got painted green with like white horns, and like I said, this is really a octopus-looking monster, and it's kind of a neat little side thing to kind of go check out when come see the Hodag.
Yes, you could have an itinerary.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of people, they like to do like cryptid road trips, and I had some guy last summer. He stopped in and he was jumping for joy when he got there, and he comes in and he shows me his GPS. He took a screenshot of it. What was it, like 16 hours? They drove 16 hours from Kansas straight to my store as their destination. I was like, holy shit, you guys are insane. I was like, that's awesome. Their next stop was the Mothman Museum in West Virginia.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of driving.
And then after that, they were going to the International Cryptozoology Museum in Maine.
Wow, basically just going clear across the country. Gosh, yeah.
They were going clear across the country, stopping at every cryptid in Timbuktu along the way.
Sounds a lot of fun. Like a lot of fun if you have the time and I suppose, I don't know if you can have a job doing that, but
yeah, well, it was last year. COVID was
that's true.
The thing.
True.
And a lot of people had nothing to do, and you couldn't do crap. Nothing was open, and well, your car is always open, so might as well hop in it and go for a ride, I guess. And that's what people were doing.
Well, once again, if people want to learn more about your shop, where should they go?
The hodagstore.com or Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you there.
I'm Jason Rigdon, and you have been listening to episode number 22 of the Podcast of Mystery, originally transmitted on
Sunday, July 18th, 2021.
If you want more information on me, this show, or my guests, please visit podcastofmystery.com. If you have a guest or a topic that you would like to hear on the show, please email podofmystery@gmail.com. You can also send any feedback or comments to that same address. This audio program is copyrighted by me, Jason Rigdon, in 2021 and is freely available under the Creative Commons Attribution License. And don't forget to leave the Podcast of Mystery a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.